Okay. Call the meeting to order. Please join the pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome people. We have a public hearing at 5 o'clock, but we'll get to work on some of the stuff. Before then, make a motion to accept the minutes of the August 23rd, 2020 pre-board of selectmen's meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I make a motion to approve the minutes of the August 23rd Board of Selectmen's meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
I get, oh, yeah, okay. Selectmen's non-public minutes, I make a motion to accept them for August 23rd.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Selectmen's, I make a motion to approve the selectmen's work session minutes of August 23rd.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the selectmen's work session minutes, August 24th, I make a motion to approve them.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And selectmen's work, I make a motion to approve this work session minutes from September 1st, 2022.
Did I get this done? Were they actually in this folder?
September 1st, I thought they were. We signed, I don't know, maybe they weren't. We signed a bunch of them.
Yeah, so many work sessions last.
Okay.
That was the grant one, right?
It should be three.
I don't think I did
1,
that.
2,
I agree before and first.
3, 4, 5.
Were there two work sessions?
Yeah.
August 24th, August 23rd,
Yeah.
23rd, 23rd. No, don't have September 1st.
Good.
So I'll rescind that motion.
Second.
And then we signed in the signature folder, there was some personal action forms, some for the fire department, library, whatever. I make a motion to approve one manifest dated September 8th for $95,966.09.
Second.
Then moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I make a motion to approve another manifest dated September 8th in the amount of $1,666.63.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And in the mail folder, we had the quarterly report from Action Ambulance. Actually, it covers half the year, second quarter, first and second quarter. Administrator comments.
So based on that Action Ambulance report, we invoiced Green Mountain Center for their portion of the ambulance. That's been done already. And
Do they get a copy of that report too?
certain pages of it,
Yeah.
we did what we've done in the past. I just copied it. And then I've set up a meeting, half-hour meeting with Matt Surge. I think it was last Board of Selectmen's meeting. Y'all wanted to talk with him for half an hour. So that'll be prior to the next BOS meeting. Vicki, you had voiced a concern. You're gonna be okay with that? You voiced a concern about me scheduling it that day.
No, I'm fine. I thought I answered you. Said
Okay.
that was fine. On the
Alright.
20th, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
3,
Yeah,
3:30.
Yeah,
At
no.
3 o'clock.
Yeah,
3 o'clock. Yeah, no, that's
All right.
fine.
okay, and then we need to set up a, work session for the transfer station operating plan. When you all wanna go over that with Mike,
Okay.
give me your calendar, give me an idea.
Well, I
This
was
week,
gonna
next
bring
week?
up,
Okay,
that I have someone that we want to have to meet first and talk over.
okay,
I was gonna bring that up.
All right.
Before the meeting with Mike.
okay. All right, I'm on vacation next week.
Mhm.
I'm talking to the, our computer guy tomorrow, scheduling time in to fix the back room. Poor Carol Fister was beside herself today, it wasn't connecting to the internet again, and that started my day with a whirling dervish. So we need to get the house set up on that, make sure, I think the, supervisor, the checklist don't have their own account on it, and so we're just gonna double check those two, make sure that the phone's working back there. I don't know how it all got fixed because it was working. And Lisa started last week just doing a great job. She did all the accounts payable for the first time, and I think she's gonna be a real asset. And she's gonna start helping out with payroll, the next payroll, she'll get involved with that, and then we'll have in October her come in 2 days a week, so she'll do all of the accounting. That'd be great. That's it.
Will you get the office covered for next week?
Yeah, Nicole will be here for 3 days and Lisa will be here Thursday.
Okay. Okay. Vicky.
Signs were, again,
Yeah,
signs for the backside of the transfer station.
Yeah.
Have they been
I haven't
ordered?
ordered them yet. There was an email I was gonna mention to you. They're looking for pictures of invasive plants on landfills. The state's looking for pictures, so if we had a picture of the knotweed on the cap, the landfill capped area, we could submit it to the state. I don't know why. I'll give you the email.
Well, okay, maybe this will explain it. And also, the handicap sign, that hasn't been ordered either, okay. I do have a meeting with Nicole Armaganian, she's from Primax Insurance. And to discuss platforms in front of the compactors. And the more I got thinking about what the guys were wanting, that flat table for glass to go over on casters, I got thinking, yeah, if someone leans against it and they're not locked. So I'm gonna discuss that with her too.
You might ask her while she's there, cause she just kind of walked the whole thing, but she might find other things that we don't have.
Oh, yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. And let's see, went to the Wakefield transfer station again, talked to the guy, the manager there. And kind of looked at different things, thinking, getting ideas. They have like a chute that goes right down, it's like, comes wide at the top and shoots on that. So they throw stuff down and it goes into the open,
Yeah,
you know, container. Anyways, and the pole that I asked, because there's a sign that's rusted and wiggly coming out of the ground. That's Mark, if that will come to that pole. Do you know if we have any in?
I haven't gone out to the shed,
Okay,
no. I have to order the street signs as well and post for those.
okay. And did Mark get back to you about
Freon,
Freon?
yes.
He did, okay. The knotweed. Okay, I'm gonna pass these out. Do you want to pass it? not that we weren't hungry. I did call, Department of Agriculture and, talked to a Doug Seigan. And these are what he suggested me to do. So I went on to the site and it's about control methods of Japanese knotweed. And basically, there's not a lot that can be done. There are like 3 options. The best thing not to do is not keep mowing it. They said every time you mow it, it makes it worse. So one of the suggestions was to mow it down in September and then get carpet or heavy land fabric, heavy duty, because if it pokes through, you've lost your, incentive. And then cover it with wood chips. And hopefully that will take care of it.
I will forward you a link to the professor at UNH that did that study over 3 years.
Mhm.
And what you just described was everything that he ended up putting down on paper.
Yeah, well, this guy, Doug, said that what usually happens is people put down, it's called glyphosate, it's an herbicide. And that usually takes care of
The
it.
problem is we're in a wetland, so we've got to basically use wetland rules, and that's not allowed.
Really?
In the
Because
wetland.
I told him that we were in wetland. Really?
There's apparently only one herbicide that can be used in that environment.
Well, so then we're at a point where.
We need to find a licensed person. Do they have any companies licensed on their website?
You had asked me that, and he didn't have any recommendations of any. He said landscaping might, but.
Alright. Yeah, because it has to be applied by a licensed
Right.
person for the state. So,
Because I asked him if he had suggestions of any, and he said that he didn't have any. I'm sure it's sort of one of those, I'm not gonna suggest it and then something go wrong. But he said we're not the only ones that are having problems with it, but that doesn't help us get rid of it.
I have Violet doing work at the house on trees.
Yeah, but you had that.
No, what I'll do is I'll call them and find out who their competitors were when they were doing it. See if I can get him to give me 3 or 4 names of companies that he's aware of that are still doing it. That may be a lead, Mike, I'll try it.
Okay. And I believe that is it. Yeah.
Those grates there at the transfer station, Mark had an idea, why don't we just spray paint them bright yellow?
Well, they are they're rusted, but they were at one time
No, they,
a color, weren't they? Because it looks like there's some color on them. No.
just, I mean, that's what Primex said, just out here, paint the front of the step, out there, the edge of the step yellow. So,
I still want to talk, because I know that Chuck said something about not having anything to hang on to when they step up on it, or off it. If they start to fall or whatever, there's nothing there. Yeah.
but putting railings on, then the guys can't, they just tip them up. So in the winter time, they can just plow right by, so they defeat that purpose.
Okay, well.
Even if we
I'll
just,
see what, I'll
Ask
see
her
what,
for options.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
since she recommends at least painting
Okay,
bright yellow or something, so.
okay.
You got anything, Chuck?
Couple things. The historic town hall project for Powder Post Beetle repairs is underway. Good news is with preservation work, you always discover new things, and we did, so it's gonna be an enlarged project. The architect I met with this morning, they're gonna produce an additional report with the structural engineer. It'll cost more money, which will come out of probably the phase 2 funding that we've started to raise. There is a special historic town hall project team meeting this Wednesday night, September 7th at 6 p.m. And we will hold that at the Effingham Preservation Society. And we will talk about the state of where we are at that point in time. I'm attending the Carroll County Communications District Planning Committee meeting tomorrow morning at 10 at the Carroll County Administration Complex, and the meeting is open to the public. We did paperwork last week in a couple of the work sessions to sign the project agreement for a $400,000 grant from an application that Mike Cahalan and HEB pulled together. We were awarded that project for the Wilkinson Swamp road culverts to be changed into a bridge. And there'll be more details coming with that as soon as we can put something together as a handout. Timing we have relative to using the grant, how it can be used, what the options are, etc. The agreement needed to be signed last week so we could get it off to the governor's office so the governor can sign it and we can begin doing some of the permit, DES permit process. I signed up for the full day 2022 Hard Road to Travel workshop over in Concord, October 6th, full day event. And that's what I had.
Okay, I don't have too much. Green Mountain Road paving will be starting tomorrow morning. They had a little problem trying to finish up Freedom with a batching plant breaking down, so put them a couple days behind. They planned on starting last Friday, and that didn't help. So he talked to me this morning, and they're gonna start tomorrow morning. They would have started today, but the rain held it off. Bailey Road, I think they started down there today. Equipment went by anyway, so and that's all I got. That's really pressing. We got a couple of things in the business to do. We're gonna renew the generator contract. I believe, I don't know if Randy told you we only did it yearly, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And just my own personal opinion, I think we should look at some other vendors.
Will they come in and work on that though?
They came in and worked at our generator, and a couple weeks later it was running rich and pulling carbon monoxide into our building. So, and I've heard similar things from the same company at other places. So.
When's that contract expire?
I don't know if it said in there, they're just waiting for their.
I don't think it did
renewal.
say.
Typically in advance when
We just paid for a service.
Yeah, it doesn't
it's
say date to
typically
date.
annual.
Yeah. So. Do we want to hold off or do we want to?
Well, if JT has a couple of options we can take a look at, I think it'd be worth taking a look at it.
Will they come in, would another company work on that type of generator?
I'm sure they would. I could do some research and see who's in the area.
Okay, and get back to us by next meeting?
Yep.
So we can make a decision then. And we get the petition presented to us for testing the wells at Mina. You want to discuss that or?
I think we need to have Matt weigh in on the process and procedure while it's still an active case before the planning board.
Yeah, the planning board hasn't ruled on it yet. I just think we should probably hold off at this point from ordering anybody to do anything. So that's my opinion, but
I agree with you.
And I'm good until after the planning board makes their ruling.
Mr. Chairman, are you entertaining public comment at this point?
not at this point, no.
Okay.
You'll have your chance.
Thank you.
Be later on. So I think I'll make the motion to hold off until either the planning board rules on it, and we also maybe check with town council.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Already announced Bailey Road Bridge is in progress, probably through October, sometime into October. And Deanna not being here, but it's primary voting. You got preliminary voting, primary. I'll excuse you.
Thank you.
The voting here next Tuesday, the 13th, from I believe it's 8 to 7. The polls are 8 to 7. Yeah. Okay. Departments and committee, JT, you're on.
Not a whole lot. I gave you guys a copy of statistics for August.
Yeah.
I did a simplified format similar to what Randy was presenting in the past. If you guys want to take this, if you have something that's not here that you want to see or something different, mark it up. And if you want to leave it in my box, I can modify this for whatever you guys want to see different. So at the top, I've got 36 calls for service for the month of August. 3 medical calls at Green Mountain Treatment Center for the month of August. 21%, or I'm sorry, 21 calls, which is 58% of the call volume during the daytime coverage. 15 calls, which is 41%, was outside of the daytime coverage. And then a listing of each call we had through the month with the type of call, the address, start and end time, the number of responders from Effingham, and then whether or not it was during the duty hours. Motion committee box up.
Have you built an Excel sheet for this that you can easily load, or do you have to manually look at all the individual?
This is very easy.
Okay.
The amount of data that I was presenting before was what was very difficult. So if this is what you guys are looking for, this is simple to come up with everything.
This satisfies what I'm looking for.
Yep, me too.
We might find in the future, might tweak it a little bit.
Yeah, if you come up with anything, just let me know.
Yeah.
If you have anything you'd like to see.
Or if you come up with anything, we can let us know. And say, what do you think about doing this or that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I got for you.
Okay, and FEMA's still on the back burner?
Still working on FEMA.
Yeah.
Still pushing the state. So unfortunately, now we're at a waiting game where they've got to reach out to these other agencies and get their cost totals to meet that 2 million statewide. So we're kind of in a holding pattern at the moment.
Countywide, how bad was it?
So I don't have a countywide number, but based on talking to some of the other chiefs and stuff like that, we'll meet our countywide number without a question. We almost fulfilled the countywide number of just our town.
Really?
So yeah, it's 200,000. So we almost hit that ourselves. So
And the state was 2 million?
state is 2 million.
Yeah, probably won't.
They
hit
did have
that.
a lot over in the Lakes region, Laconia and the town surrounding Laconia got hit pretty hard too. So there's potential that we'll hit that 2 million. They are looking for other local sources of funding as well that they might be able to get us some money back. But I'm not going to cross my fingers on that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, keep working on them.
absolutely.
Okay, thanks. You guys have anything? Okay, I'll open it up to public comment.
Are you still on departments,
Yep,
if I may, health officer?
Yep.
Thank you. Couple things. One of them is that I don't know if you're aware, you might be, but Dave Gasso, like I said, was responded to another report of waste being dumped from an RV. This one was over at the Elm Street Bridge on the side of the road, parking lot stuff. So apparently, according to Dave, jump in if you want. There wasn't fecal matter, but chemicals and so forth. So
Right where you turn off and there's road that goes down,
Yeah.
almost like a landing. and
To the
then
dry
across to the
hydrant.
bottom.
Yeah.
Right there, before you leave the asphalt, they just pulled over to the side and undid it and let it run. So undid
The
their
black
septic
tank?
tank.
But now
It would be black tank.
So it
not-
was,
It could have been both tanks, but it was definitely included the black tank.
There was no solids.
But if there's any good news about it, it was high enough up and far enough from the water probably so that the leaching through the gravel will probably make it better before it hits the river
It was
and
in
goes
sand.
down into the
What day was that?
lakes.
We went Sunday morning.
Yeah, so we got the call on Sunday morning, which was nice because it actually was our neighborhood watch that got us in touch with that.
You sure it
like I
wasn't
s-
gray water from the dishing?
Yeah.
Dishwasher?
No,
We full time for 6 years, I know what.
Now, just to
It was
clarify,
not gray, it could have been gray water in addition to, but there was definitely black water released.
the state doesn't distinguish gray water from black. It's all sewage. So again, we've seen it at the Ospey Lake Dam with chemicals, and Lenny, you were there, you know that was sewage. We see it here. We've had third-party agencies that work within the state tell us that this is taking place on properties within our town. They've reported that. I'm just trying to let you guys know this problem is not lessening, it's getting worse. We have an ordinance. I'd like to see that something happen on that front. Also, we still haven't got a key. I've lost track of how many months now.
4, I
Yeah.
believe.
Waiting for a key to get in the back so we can establish an office and take some of the records that are piling up in my house and put them into an appropriate file cabinet and computer system.
Mike, can you schedule some time with me so we can set you up? Because we have
Absolutely.
cabinets and I assume you need a walking cabinet, so.
A locking
Yeah.
cabinet, but a key to access the building as
Yeah.
well. So those things, and when budget season comes in, I'd like you guys to consider that perhaps that we may want to look at some protective equipment, some very basic stuff that health officers should have. One of the things we entered a home in the past, and I wouldn't want to go back in there without some kind of protective gear. It wasn't a pretty.
You put a list together with the price tag, right?
We certainly do that, and I'm not looking to break the bank, I'm looking for very basic items. We're not going out there as some kind of full-fledged health department that reacts to crises.
We need a hazmat suit.
So, yeah, some basic things that you would have, gloves, and most of those conditions, if you went into a hoarder situation, you want there's a double type suit thing that's used. I can, again, not to do it to you here in public, but something I would like to talk to you folks about for consideration going forward. So those are the things on that, and I wanted to quiz you guys on a statement you had read from on our ambulance contract. Basically, half the year has been reported. Has anybody done a breakdown to see if we're reporting more ambulance calls, less ambulance calls from the previous year? So,
I can tell you based on my stats that we are ahead of last year.
okay.
At last calculation, I was figuring probably 18 to 20% ahead of what we were last year this time.
There's a tax hit. Thank you for that.
I have a question to add to the key situation. 4 months now, I'm pretty sure. What's going on? Why can't we
you
get a
have the
key
keys,
to
you
this
said, right?
thing and let us get going?
I have keys to that building. It will not let you in this building to be able to get to your mailbox at all. I wrote to A&D Lock. I can forward you the email. I wrote to him right away. He replied back from the mail.
You have keys to the back building.
Yeah,
We have not got those, right?
I just told you, come on in and get them, but you're not gonna get in here to your mailbox. And so it's just gonna create another question from you.
Well, okay, well, to Dave's point, I guess we'll take what we've got come back and exchange it when you have to do purpose to
I think what we have, actually, if we could just get something to get going on.
Well, I just
Okay.
asked you to set up an appointment with me, so you, because you can't just go into other people's space, there's 5 departments back there. You need to share the space and you just
Well,
can't,
we've had 4 months to discuss that and
Oh.
go in there
come knock on my door any day.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
and that's the first we've heard.
I just want to close this out quick, because this is not really helpful, and I know there's a bunch of people want to speak on things. But the transfer station operating plan, I sent that out to you guys, didn't really mark it up as a draft, but it is a draft. And 2 things are left on that for you guys to kind of participate to some level on, if we're moving forward with that, which is schedule of fees, because that would need to go with this for a submission, and then a mapping. Chuck, that map you got HEB to send out, I do have that, and I also have another one. All of that information, I think, would work really good on there, so we do a third party vendor to draw that. Lastly, Vicky, are you bringing somebody in to do something?
Yes, I want him to meet the board of selectmen,
Him who, if I may?
the Wakefield,
Oh,
transfer
transfer
station.
station. Oh. Last thing here, and I'll get concede the floor. Is Willie Farnham at your request, Chuck? I contacted Mr. Farnham from Tamworth, and he's done a big huge project up there. They're still in the process of it. So I did send you an email of available dates. He is willing to come here and discuss with the public or the committee and whomever would like to attend all of what it took to get to where they are. With that,
I'll put out the email to the strategy committee. And then once we pick the date, we'll post that on the town website as a public meeting.
all right, great. And I'll jump back in later, but I know there's a bunch of folks here.
Oh, yeah. We're gonna do this public hearing. We'll get back to you. Under the provision of RSA 31:95B3A, make a motion to open a public hearing to accept unanticipated monies in an amount in excess of $10,000. I hear a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, number 1, I make a motion to accept funds from the American Rescue Plan Act in the amount of $77,365.65, which will be used for the Bailey Road bridge work. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I make the motion to accept funds from the state of New Hampshire Department of Transportation, the amount of $69,682.78 for road maintenance. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 And lastly, I make a motion to accept funds from the Effingham Preservation Society in the amount of $23,105 for the historic town hall rehabilitation project. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? There being none, we'll call it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And I'll close the public hearing. Okay, get that out of the way. That was painless. Okay.
You didn't open it up to public comment when we all yelled, don't take the money.
Now I'll open it up to public comment. Please keep it civil. Okay?
I got a few things I wanted to talk to you about. One, boat storage. 2 boats showed up on Green Mountain Road. 2 more showed up Sunday. That's Friday to Sunday, 4 boats now stored on Green Mountain Road. We talked about this in planning. Has the board had time to talk about it, about a cease and desist order on that property and the one on 153?
We haven't had a chance to talk about it, and Rebecca's out with COVID, so.
Okay, I just want to reiterate.
Yeah.
Planning board's position on that, we're right after the Labor Day weekend, and as soon
that's
as
when
the
the boats-
weekend's over,
Yeah.
the boats are coming out, and we
Correct.
should hit this in the bud.
Yeah.
And put a cease and desist order on before they come. Okay, geez. Last meeting, David Strauss gave us a bit of a clarification on the email that was sent to all the boards about the use of the attorney. But the selectmen said nothing. So the letter, I believe, was from the selectman's office.
Correct.
And the way I read it, and I believe the way Mike reads it, it's pretty much a cease and desist on using the attorney for any new the problems that come up. And what I would like to
Keep going,
see.
there was more in that meeting.
Yeah.
We made a commitment to have a meeting with the health and the attorney to talk about the cases. So
Right,
we
that's
will be
true.
doing that.
But what I'd like to do is request another email from the Board of Selectmen specifying exactly what they meant with, so that we know exactly what we can and cannot do.
It's pretty clear. Come to us when you've got a case you want to take. And if we need to, we'll get a hold of legal counsel. That's what we talked about last meeting.
We're not denying legal contact. It's just, is it necessary?
ask
We want,
first. Right.
yeah, we just want to make
Get
sure, is
permission
it
first.
necessary? Or if it's
All
a,
right, moving on, new camper on Green Mountain Road at 103. The one that never had a camper now has a camper.
The one that had the plastic house sticking.
And the door that sticks up.
Yeah. There's a camper there now.
There's been there for over a week. I called, or we emailed Rebecca and got a response saying that David Hines said that there is no camper there. So we took a picture of it with the next email to Rebecca and said, well, it's still there. And so I guess, after also seeing this latest spill from the RV, the question is, when are we gonna do something about these RVs?
Well, according to this, he didn't issue a permit for the camper.
There is no permit. I asked her.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory that they looked at the other two that had no permit for their camper either, and no permission to do what they're doing, and said, well, they're getting away with it, let's do it too, which is exactly what we've been saying is gonna happen for well over a year now.
Anybody staying in it?
Full time.
Yeah, full timers now.
Yeah.
And the original one has been there for 3 years, maybe more. So this is not a 1 year or a 2 year, this is at least 3 years this has been going on since the original one went in. A year later, the next one, and after that, this one. So this isn't getting better, it's getting worse.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is this something, David, that it's like they leave, they come back?
Mm-mm.
No, they're
leave
staying
with the
in the
camp-
thing.
is
The
it-
cars
so
are
the
there
camper's been
every
there the
single
whole
day
time?
and every night, they're there.
The one that just went in?
The one that just
Is that
went
what
in,
you're
they're
talking
there
about? The one
all
you're
the
speaking
time
about.
now. And it's different people too. It's not the owners, I don't think. It's some, I don't know whether they sublet it or what. But there's other people there as well, overnighters and throughout the week. The whole time.
It's a bad picture, but
So
And
Dave-
the other two are permanents.
David-
One of them, the one that's
Kind of a
directly
bad
across from Randy.
And this is from Green Mountain?
Were,
You know
I
where the
believe,
plastic
told
house
they had
was?
I remember,
to
but
cease
I
and
don't remember
desist.
when
I'm not
it
sure,
ran
Yeah, I
but-
thought it left.
Vicky, one time.
Yeah, I believe they were approached by
yeah, we
Rebecca
go home.
and
I'm going to.
They stopped for a little while, and they actually came in this spring and started cleaning up, but then we noticed that the yurt they had went back, and they still have the other campers. And there's a car there constantly, permanently. So, again, like I said, this is 3 years now this has been going on, and this is just letting everybody in the neighborhood know that they can do whatever they want with these campers. That we gotta do something.
And David went out there and looked
I
at it.
don't know if he did or not, because what we heard from Rebecca is that David said it wasn't there. Well, it was there. We know it was there. We have pictures of it there. And so that makes me believe that David did not say it. But
We'll check with David tomorrow.
I'm not trying to stir up trouble there. What I'm trying to do is get a response. Cease and desist. Let's get down on these before they cause even more trouble. Yeah, I have copies of those emails as well, if you don't believe what I'm saying.
I believe it.
Okay. And I'm all done, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? Blair.
Couple things. First, I wanted to introduce Bill Bartowitz, who's one of the people on the petition that I wasn't gonna speak about the petition, but he's here. And he's a quiet man, but if you wouldn't mind telling your story, he's only 300 feet from the Boyle's gas tanks where they were illegally installed. And he's been a long time resident in Effingham, now lives in Mosby right across the border, but his property abuts the Mina property, and he's quite concerned. And when he bought the property, just before Mina bought their property, he had his well fully tested to make sure it was okay before he bought it. And I'd like him to have the opportunity to speak to you directly about his concerns.
We moved there because it was out of the way. I don't deal with people too well. And like Blair said, we had our wells tested before we bought that property, and it tested out okay. And my concern is, if there is a spill with this new gas station supposedly going in, who's gonna protect me and my well? Certainly not gonna be Ossipee, because they don't even wanna listen to me. So, somebody's gotta listen.
My guess would be if there's a spill, the state will get involved and the state will tell
Why
Well,
doesn't the state get involved now?
that there isn't a spill.
No, but doesn't the state have a mandate that there's a public well on that property, and it's within their mandate of, I think it's 300 feet, 500 feet? So why doesn't the state do something about that? And why doesn't the town of Effingham sue these people or fine them for putting the tanks in there legally?
Well, I can't answer why we're not suing, because right now there's nothing's been resolved right now. I'm still going through the process. So once the process is done, then maybe something different will occur. But right now, we're still going through, they still don't have planning board approval.
Yeah, it seems like every time there's a planning board meeting, it's postponed for this reason and postponed for that reason, and nothing's getting done.
No, tell me about it. I'm on that board. I know what it's going through.
It seems like,
I'd like to get it out of the way. It's been long enough.
Many of the questions you're answering have been asked of me and also of our engineers that we hired to look things over, and but of course we're not going to have real answers until it's over.
And there's been stipulation put on MENA to have these forms submitted, and they wait till the last minute. I haven't submitted them.
Yeah.
So why is there something done about that?
That's been addressed.
Yeah. We've talked about that as a board.
Right.
Thank
With
you.
the well issue, there's been a waiver from the state.
That's not true.
No.
Absolutely not.
Mr.
We're not
Chairman,
supposed to be discussing between each other.
Tim Otterbach, I'm an Ospey
Yeah.
resident. And in the interest of transparency and full disclosure, I'm also on the board of Ospey Lake Alliance. And as such, represent the board tonight. And we have standing regarding the Mina gas station as an abutter. I'm here to ask a couple of questions regarding the letter that you received, the June 2nd, excuse me, the June 9th letter. I think it's the 9th.
It is, isn't it?
From the abutters, both in Ospey and Effingham, and you addressed the first point, which was well testing. I know you voted on not acting on it. My only comment, the reason I make this is I want to get it on record, is that in fact, when the tanks were put in, the excavation was dug deeper than the previous excavation when they removed the old tanks, and they discovered naphthalene and a few other carcinogens in the soil. And when the new tanks were put in, they dug deeper, disturbing soil that was contaminated. And it is conceivable that those carcinogens and other commodities have traveled and moved into the groundwater. And I think this is certainly a reason that the board should at least consider, between now and not too far off in the future, even before the planning board votes on approval or disapproval of the site plan review, that there is a look at potentially testing the 4 wells that are within the 500-foot radius of the underground tanks that were installed illegally in spring of last year. Secondly, I'd like to address the soil that was removed from the site. When the tanks were removed, we know that there was an extremely large amount of contaminated soil removed from the site. To date, no one has been able to provide any documentation as to where that soil went. There is a state requirement under RSA, excuse me, New Hampshire Enviro OR 61106A2, which addresses contaminated soil disposal and reuse. And the applicant and his contractors have not provided any documentation as to where that soil has gone. There are certainly some rumors floating around as to where it went, some in the town of Effingham, some in the town of Freedom, maybe elsewhere. I think that it would behoove the select board to consider that there is a potential health hazard to the citizens of Effingham and the others as well, that you may want to consider asking that question of the applicant, because this is within the realm of health, safety, and welfare, not planning board issue per se. The third item I would like to bring up was that during the time that just after the tanks were installed and the additional construction work was done on the apartment building, and including new septic system, et cetera, there was issued, as you're aware, a work stop or a cease and desist order by your zoning officer. However, during that cease and desist, there was no itemized list of what the violations were, just that they were to cease and desist because they didn't have the permit and they didn't have a site plan review approval. But conventionally, and I know this because I'm a former member of the Ospey Planning Board and Conservation Commission as well for several years, and conventionally there was a requirement to have a list of the violations made, which is good for public knowledge so that people are aware, including other members of the town bodies, including health people and fire department and whomever else, the different boards and the selectmen, to understand, exactly, what the violations were, because we really don't have any documentation. We haven't seen any documentation on exactly what was performed in the apartment building, for example, and what the specific violations were, because quite honestly, to protect the interest of the town, if this ends up going to court, that's one thing that obviously we discuss
And I'm just thinking that that should be at least looked into, and you know, certainly a request is there to have the zoning officer provide or create a list of actual violations to the town ordinance relative to, you know, what the violations were. I mean, there were 2 or 3 things that occurred. But it would be, I think it would be in the interest of the townspeople to have that information as well. And then, sorry, I'm trying to read from my notes from my phone.
We certainly can get zoning officer to put something together.
Right, that would be appreciated. Additionally, you know, I know this has probably come up in discussion several times in informal conversations, but I seriously, since this was such an egregious violation of town ordinance, when the tanks were installed and the work was commenced on site, that I believe it's the responsibility of the town to assess fines for violations of those actions by the applicant, who admitted purposely that he went ahead with risk involved, knowing full well that he was in violation, but he said, we calculated our risk, and he's on public record as saying that. So I'm asking again if there's a possibility that the select board will consider the possibility of fining the applicant for, if nothing else, to help recoup some of the expenses that the town has incurred in hearing the case and all of the, you know, associated expenses that the town has had to bear as a result of his actions. Thank you again for your time.
Okay.
Rich Fay on the same subject. I'm from Ospey also, and I'd like to just speak on behalf of the guys in the petition that signed the petition, but in particular Bill Bartowitz, because he did 3 years in Vietnam, and I did 30, and he's done a hell of a lot more for our country than I ever did. And he had to deal with cancer problems as a result of being over there, and that followed him back here. So health, safety, and welfare of our veterans is very important. Now, if you look at the Boyles property, right up there on that sandbank, not too far away, it's only 310 feet from the tank actually to his well. That's not a lot of distance. He's also got an artesian well, obviously, because he's on a gravel pit. So he's got to get his well very deep, probably in line with where the groundwater is flowing right now. He bought his property when it was a groundwater protection district, with the understanding that it's prohibited to have a gas station right there. Lo and behold, without his knowledge and without permission from Effingham or anybody else, he gets 2 15,000-gallon tanks put into the ground that are going to be filled up with gas hundreds and hundreds of times for the next 40 years. He's also going to have people coming up in cars and with little canisters, and he's going to have to worry about the gas getting into the aquifer. The other thing is, in 2016, New Hampshire DES contracted for a 72-page report that specifically said the direction of the groundwater is from the Route 25 towards Ossipee Lake. In other words, this water just doesn't sink into the ground and go away. It goes, the groundwater flow is actually been scientifically determined by contractors in a very comprehensive report, that it goes directly in the direction, not even northeast or northwest, it goes in a northerly direction right towards Bill Bartowitz. So I'm less concerned, frankly, about the existing contamination that might have happened in the last 2.5 or 3 years since he got his gas, his water filled. I'm concerned about testing it now so that we've determined whether or not there's any contamination now. And if it's clean, we know prior to the gas being filled that there's no contamination right now in his well. And I can tell you, because right here on my phone is this is a check receipt that I got from New Hampshire DES Water. I got my own water tested on August 15th, and it was $225. So I think that Bill Bartowitz, a veteran, shouldn't have to, frankly, he's on limited income. He can't afford it anyways. I can afford it. I got it done just because we've been talking about it a lot. But strictly for his mental health, I ask that you reconsider the vote that you made before listening to all of us talk about it, and vote in favor of letting these guys get their water tested prior to any gas going in. Thank you.
Mike,
Yeah, let me, with the health concerns that everybody is aware of that are being brought up by folks, and I respect everyone's opinion and knowledge is being focused on all of this. I just thought that with this board, you should probably be aware there was a report that is out there for the removal of the materials at some point in testing of contaminants that they would normally test for. There were quite a number of them. I don't remember exactly. It's been a while since I saw it. Naphthalene was one of them. It's common to like mothballs and other things that come from other sources. I'm not a chemist, so let's forget that. It's just simply that there is a report that was done on this, and you folks should probably familiarize yourself with that. Nate Fogg could get you that information for anybody on the board who hasn't seen it. As far as the state regulations that Mr. Aderbach brought up, I don't know what the town has to really do with that, but you certainly could reach out to the state and see if they have a report of where that material went, or share your concerns as to tracking down any materials that may have been removed. But I think that probably would end up falling into the state's category. And as far as the cease and desist, I was in that chair when that little item came about, and what I recall of it, because I had to go personally over there and talk to the contractors on that point, was that it was established at the planning board at that time that there was an oversight in the ground product protection ordinance was not recognized as pertaining to this particular property at that time. And that's what prompted the cease and desist. I believe there was an exchanges between the applicant and the zoning officer in regards to them taking the risk of putting the tanks in, so that if what they didn't actually comport with what the final site plan by the planning board would be, that the onus of dealing with that expense and any changes would be on the applicant, Nina. But the reason, as I recall, was that we put a cease and desist because it raised a new requirement that had to be resolved, which was the groundwater protection that was, nobody seemed to recognize at the time. But that's for you guys, just some information to go forward and to try and look.
yeah, because that happened before my time on the board.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify a couple of statements just made. Number one, it wasn't a new ordinance. It's been in place for some time. And number two, the DES has not been able to find or produce any documentation on the determination of where that soil was removed. The contractor is bound by law to provide that information. And like I said, I believe that, it would be certainly beneficial if the select board requested that of the applicant, because it does have an implication as to the health, safety, and welfare of the town residents. The other issue that just comes to mind was the statement that Mr. Fahey made about Mr. Bartowitz as well. The other well which is the one on site, is also a well that's providing water for the two residents in the apartment building on the site. And they also are potentially at risk for the contaminated soil, which includes not just naphthalene, but also the report listed some alkyl benzenes, ethyl benzenes, toluene, and xylene. Certainly the one that's probably the most concerning is naphthalene, because it has the longest lifespan in soil. The other issue that comes to mind is that, the whole groundwater movement, that you take a gallon of gasoline and dump it into the ground, it will take over 100 years for that to become non-environmental. It just doesn't go away. You can't just dilute it down. It's always going to be there. And I think this is another reason why, we're asking the board for potentially reconsider your vote on having and not just Mr. Bartowitz as well, but the other three wells that are within the 500-foot radius of the tanks be tested to create a baseline based upon potential future decision by the planning board. And again, this is relative to the health, safety, and welfare of the townspeople. Thank you.
Just for clarification for Mr. Adbach, I didn't say it was a new ordinance. It came in 2011, I believe. I was just simply stating when the process was being reviewed by the various land use boards,
Okay.
it was an oversight originally that ordinance applied.
I understand.
So I was.
No, I get you.
I'm trying to fight you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Gentlemen, Matt?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Curry Fine. I just live direction-wise, just to the northwest of like what used to be Boyles. So it's as a crow flies, it's more than 500 feet. But I'm very concerned when I looked into started getting information about this and realized that there were a lot of carcinogens that were found in this old gravel pit area underneath where those tanks, old tanks have been, when they start digging around. And I guess my interpretation, please correct me if I'm wrong, that what they did was illegal because it violated a standing ordinance that's already been in place. Regardless if they're willing to accept risk or dump it on other people, my understanding was they violated code at that point. And so I think that it would be exquisitely important for the health and safety of everybody in that area whose wells would be affected, that there's at least a baseline understanding, because if the ones that are right around that are clean, then it relieves the rest of us from having to lay out. And I looked at the price, it was somewhere around $200, maybe more, to get my water tested, to understand if this corporation that started digging around in this at-risk area has impacted, me personally, my health personally. Why shouldn't they pay a fine that part of which could be used to test all these wells around, and then the rest of us could rest assured while the planning board is doing what the planning board does, to make a final decision. At least we can, every time we drink a glass of water, or our kids do, or our grandchildren do, worry if we're putting ourselves at risk. So the question I guess I'd like to put to you is, independent of what the planning board does, where would the responsibility lie to create the responsibility for the applicant, which I understand is a corporation that's got all sorts of assets around, to do the responsible thing for the violation they did. Is that a question that you're able to answer or think about it, or discuss it?
I'm not going to answer it right now, because
But
I have to think about that for a while.
Because I just hope I articulated it correctly. I'm not an expert in all things, but I try to understand what's going on here from all sides. It just seems like right now the burden of proof should be on the violator, not those of us who are just, passive recipients of their malaction.
Like I said, no, there's nothing in the tanks, so
No,
as far as anything happening right now.
No, that's and that I think was important differentiator. The future is the future,
Right.
But they dug up and disrupted soil and ground and then stuck in tanks and so forth. Where now there's a lot of obviously water flow through that. Where there's been demonstrated, there's a whole bunch of carcinogens that have been stirred up, and has that contaminated proximate wells? And if the proximate wells are contaminated, how about just downstream a few hundred yards for the rest of us, the hundreds of us now who are drinking basically from the same well? We're just, lateral flow.
And it wasn't a small excavation, it was 300 yards of dirt that they took out to get those tanks in. And it was below where in your report, when you read the report, it's below the report. So it's a lot of dirt they took out.
Where's the information coming from?
In the report,
In
DES.
report?
the report the planning board has.
No, I don't think they have.
2016, well, I got it from the planning board website. I think. It's the 2016 yes.
Okay, it's gonna go be the planning board's problem right now, so.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, the tanks do have a liquid in them at the present time, that's required by law to keep them from floating up since they are within proximity of the water table. Again, this is one of those things that I believe, since the tanks were put in illegally, that perhaps it might be worthwhile for the town to have your zoning officer conduct a test to confirm what the commodity is and how much it is, because the reports, again, with the tank installation and inspection doesn't identify the quantity of materials put in the tanks. And again, I sincerely doubt they would have put gasoline in there because that would have been all sorts of violations of the DES requirements. But it would be interesting to know that they have put in the appropriate amount of ballast, so to speak, which is what it's technically referred to as, to keep the tanks from floating up during high groundwater events. And we know that the bottom of the tanks are above the high groundwater level, based upon the elevations of the bottom of the infiltration basin just south of the site, before you get to Route 25. So I think it might be, again, this is one of those safety things that might be worthwhile, just to do a simple check on the part of your zoning officer to conduct that test, or request a certified inspector to do the same thing and confirm the quantity and depth and type of material in the two tanks, well, actually the multiple tanks.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything besides Mina?
Different subject, yeah,
Okay.
I got something for you. Okay, for far too many years, I suppose, the town has been grappling with livestock and dogs and issues that it creates with neighbors, and we've heard a lot about it going back for probably 12 years, and I've been listening to it. So a couple of weeks ago, when you had your meeting, a lot of people came in, the issue came around again, and actually it was the town's treasurer, planning board member, that said something about the zoning ordinance, putting that a fine. And that got me thinking, because everybody forever, whether it's the sheriff's office, local PD, state agencies, everybody was saying nothing could be done. So I kind of dismissed it until last 2 weeks ago, when the light dawned on me. You absolutely can regulate dogs that are at large, and you can regulate all farm animals from being off the property. It's powers granted to city councils, which transfers to the boards of selectmen in RSA 4717. And I'll actually give you some information I've printed off for you when I'm through here. But essentially, that is exactly the ordinance we've used before for like inspections for the fire department, where you can administer violations up to $1,000 for an occasion. So you tend to building a grading, a sliding scale, $50 for Fluffy, the little dog that gets loose the first time. Maybe you have something else for dogs that bite, but an escalation in that. So dogs that need to stay on their property, you can require that they're penned or fenced. And with that, in that RSA I just quoted, it's RSA 10, Roman 10, that you'll find the complete listing of the animals that is in outlines for farm animals, basically. And that is stock at large, to regulate, restrain, or prohibit the keeping or running of large horses, cattle, sheep, swine, geese, and other poultry animals, or any of them, to create the limits of districts within which the same may be kept, and the conditions and restrictions under which they may be kept. So that is, if you read enough of these things, that is extremely broad. You can fence them, you can pen them, you can, what you need to do is write your rules. Then you would have a hearing that you have to post notice of, but you don't have to get into all the details of what you're posting, but you hold a hearing 15 days after your advertisement goes out. You guys can do that, and then all of us can come in and say, no, we want our animals running all over everybody's property, and you can shoot us down, and you can accept the ordinance as you've written it, or you can take input and adjust things that you may have created language issues. But that's all it takes. So as fast as you can write it, advertise it, and the day after it's advertised, 15 days later, you could have a hearing on the matter. As well as a separate item, which is Roman 11, which is dogs. To regulate the keeping of dogs and their running at large, require them to be licensed and authorize destruction of those kept or running at large contrary to the ordinance. So the idea that someone in town has claimed I've got a guard dog that's 3 doors down doesn't cut it. You can regulate those to the same conditions as the other farm-related animals. So with that, I'm going to give you a series of RSAs, and I will say our Roman 16 is exactly what I'm looking for the health ordinance, because that's how you regulate health ordinance violations as well. So we have, you'll want 4717B that goes to the regulation of bylaws. It's going to reference you to 3139, administration and enforcement of the ordinance. 3139D, which is civil penalties for the same. That's a two-parter there, Chuck. Right. And then 4718, notice and publication of ordinances, which I kind of went over for you. 4719, which is basically the fees and the system for that. And forms for complaint is 4720, because you're going to need to fill out forms of complaint, appeal form, which is 4721, and then public hearing notice, which I kind of described, which is 4726. And for good measure, I thought I'd throw in the farm and agricultural farming, which is RSA 2134A, which will probably allude to there's nothing that allows anything under agriculture to run free. So there's no, you can't stop a lot of agricultural activities, but you can regulate them. So there's no reason that anybody should be allowing any of these things to take place. Hopefully you can work with that, guys.
I'd like to put a human element to this as well. I was over on Townhouse Road again this week, taking more pictures of livestock doing damage. And the trees that you saw photos of are all dead now. So this is a 12-year odyssey for this particular person.
Okay, oh yeah.
Non-Nina, back to forestry issues. I want to talk again about the dump and what's going on behind there, because they're still cutting there. And I wondered if you want to tell me the story again about why they're going in there cutting. I think you told me last week they're taking some wood out for the restoration project. But there's a lot of wood going on there, and I have the intent to cut now. So I wondered if you wanted to add to what you told me last time.
Okay, the original cut went in,
yeah,
so that we could get timber for the historic town hall project.
From just the rich parcel.
Transfer station.
Okay, so we're gonna take out, what kind of wood were you taking out?
Wow.
He's taking out
Spruce. Yeah, he was taking more than what they
He's
needed.
selectively cutting based on his forestry expertise, different species of trees.
But this is different than what you told me last time. Last time you told me they were taking out specific trees.
They did for the HGH project. It was a general cut scheduled this year for the town, as with Hobbs Road. As part of that conversation, I approached Jeff saying, Jeff, can we log any logs for the historic town hall project, particularly hemlock and oak? And the answer to the question was, yes, I happen to be doing a cut down there. I've already cruised it. There's enough there to take care of the whole thing. In addition to that, there's a whole lot more lumber that's basically sold, and that revenue is coming back to the town.
So
subsequent to that, we had the microburst. The microburst came down, equipment went back in. That was kind of what triggered you last time out. That was because there was a lot of good freestanding timber that came down with the storm that can be logged.
it's a totally different story than what you told me last time. Last time you told me that you had not talked to him first about doing a cut, that you had asked him specifically to provide wood for the restoration project. And I went and got copies of the intent to cut. There's no red oak coming off that property, which is what I had told you before, but there's no
Okay,
red oak.
so
on
let
that
me
parcel.
finish. We found out we couldn't cut the red oak because we couldn't get it plain, dry cut and planed in time for the project. So the town had you outside of that cut by the oak, which we agreed to do.
So you should read the intent to cut, Chuck, because you might be confused, because the oak came off the Hobbs Road cut. Like a lot.
What I'm telling you is we did not use any oak from the town for the project. That was paid for directly with the sawmill from somebody else's property, not even in this town.
I agree with that. We didn't
Okay.
buy those.
So, backing up then, let's back up and let's talk about the intent to cut. This is a big cut. And you had told me last time I was here, oh, we don't know, it's some money. Do you have any concept of how much money? I think people in this room should know how much money is coming off both those parcels. It's a lot of money.
Once the accounting's done, Jeff submits it to the town.
Well, as a business plan, you should know as selectmen, that resource is my tax money. It's a lot of money. It's not $10,000. It's a lot more than that. Furthermore, since Mr. Kim is quoting all these RSAs, I have my own RSA to quote.
Go, Blair.
Okay. It's RSA 227-J. And that talks about even on town land, you have to have a contract with the person doing the logging. I am not throwing Jeff under the bus. I've walked that property with him before. I was concerned because he wasn't going to cut it. Okay, whatever, you needed the money, pulp is up, blah, blah, blah. He goes in and cuts. But you should be transparent with the citizens of this town and explain, we're going to go do a cut because we need a little extra revenue this year and the wood is high. You did not tell me that, and that angered me greatly. And I did go in and walk there, and yeah, he's cutting pretty heavily. There's a lot of chipwood going in, and there's a lot of stumpage coming out. But there's no contract with Jeff. And there's a funky conflict of interest because not only is he the forester, but he's also the contracted logger. And even if I were a homeowner, I would want two different entities. So I'm just bringing that up to the people in this room. Slight conflict of interest on that. And I've brought Peter Cole, who's a retired county forester. He was Carroll County's forester for 35 years, and I called him up to ask him what the numbers were on the stumpage, because I don't know what the prices are. And I thought he could help you explain what this intent to cut is and how much money the town could be getting from this cut.
Thanks, Blair. Blair did call and ask me my opinion as to what the stumpage value or the fair market value of the wood products coming off both woodlots would represent. And in order to get a current price, I checked with a very active licensed forester in the county who conducts numerous timber sales throughout the course of his work day. And he quoted different prices for the products coming off the properties that he manages by species and product. It's saw timber as well as pulpwood and biomass. And so I looked at the intent to cut figures, and to be honest, those are just crude estimates, as you know, and they tend to be high simply because the logger, once he exceeds the original estimate, he has to legally refile another intent. So to avoid that whole process, they tend to guesstimate high on the intent to cut form. It's the report of cut, as you folks know, that's the important actual figures that are harvested. But since we only had the intent to cut form figures, what I did was I combined the dump lot with the Hobbs lot, which represents about 100 acres of harvest area. And I came up with a total stumpage value, which is the value that the logger pays the landowner, in this case, the town, of between roughly $55,000 and $59,000. Now, again, that's based on the intent to cut figures.
And the final figures are likely to be less than that. But normally, we recommend that a forester handle the sale for the client or the landowner or the town in this case. And foresters, their performance involves, first of all, laying out the timber sale. They go in and they mark the timber and they estimate the volume by species and product. And then they negotiate with an individual logger, or they might put it up for bids, whatever the case might be, the price of those products. And they write a legally required timber sale contract between the seller and the buyer. And that contract includes the prices to be paid and all the stipulations that are expected to be performed. And then they supervise the sale and handle all the paperwork, the intent to cut, the report of cut, the transfer of funds from the logger to the town or their client in this case. And they handle it through an escrow account that they have. And for that total service, foresters charge about 20% of the stumpage value. So if you go back to the original intent figures and the estimated stumpage value between 55 and 59,000, the forester would charge approximately $11,000 to $12,000 for those services that he performed, which would leave a net to the town of somewhere between 44 and 47,000. So that kind of gives you a financial picture of what these two particular timber sale projects that the town owns should represent in terms of income, depending on what course of action. If you employed the forester, you would have their fee. If you didn't employ a forester to conduct the sale and the logger performed the service, then it would be the higher range of figures.
Jeff is the appointed town forester. He gets $1,000 stipend a year for all his work for the town.
But his logging company is getting,
He subcontracts. Check it.
on the intent, Chuck, have you not looked at the intent to cut? It's Jeff.
I've looked at a
it's
lot of
Libby
them, Blair.
logging.
Did I memorize them all? No.
It's Libby logging. It's Jeff's logging. So I'm not trying to throw Jeff under the bus. I'm just trying to say you are the businessmen of this town. And this is not being managed correctly, in my opinion. And should he get paid? Absolutely, he should get paid. But the town and the townspeople should understand the process. And I do think that when there's a big cut going forward, it should be public so the public can weigh in on this. I did call DRA as well, and I did speak to DRA, and they had the intent to cut, and they did say there's no question there should be a contract filed with the intent to cut with the logger.
If I may, guys, since I used to sit up there, and some of this has been in the works since the time I was up there, and sometimes, Chuck, your memory doesn't always serve you. So, number one, it was back in a point in time when Jeff had said that the Taylors had done a lot of work for the town over the years, and could we use them for the logging? At that point in time, we had said yes, which would probably be the subcontracted individual. Jeff works as a forester, and he hasn't taken a pay raise in decades, so we established that prior. The other thing we did, and this is where, Chuck, I don't know if you remember this, but Jeff gave us a contract that was going to be in effect probably for a 5-year span. And Jeff put those prices so ridiculously low, I called them out and said, you cannot commit to this because you'd be killing yourself. You'd end up owing the town money. I've had timber cuts before. So with that, we do have a contract. You just have to dig it out. And maybe it didn't get filed with the state, to Blair's point, but we had initially a contract with Jeff and to do some of this work. And because it doesn't exceed the $15,000 in the procurement ordinance, as stated by, well, unknown entity, logger, whatever, forester provided some numbers here, but just taking on face value, let's say we accept those numbers, the procurement ordinance would not have been violated, and such contracts are open to your discretion. Just saying that, you have some paperwork, I don't know if it's gonna suffice to cover everything, but this was covered at one point in time.
The
Whenever that
contract
does.
is not, like, the contract is not, sorry, Lenny, the contract is not for the forester, the contract is for the project. That's what the contract is supposed to be for.
Correct,
And the tailors are not the loggers, they're the haulers.
okay,
Libby is the forester and the logger. Libby, logger.
that would be the
on the-
contract.
Haul-
Transfer station property?
Yeah.
Taylor is doing it all, Jeff's not
Yeah.
involved in
Yeah,
that.
but he's hauling it.
They're cutting it and hauling it.
Yeah.
They're chipping, they're cutting,
Okay, and they're,
and they're hauling,
they're hauling.
and they're done, they moved
It's on
out today.
04 It's on 04 that Jeff's doing this.
Yeah, Jeff's doing Hobbs Road,
And he's
and Taylor is done,
The
they moved
point
out
is,
today.
it doesn't matter that you have, I know, I read the whole thing about your contract with Jeff, and I know that, he's a contractor, has been forever, it's, his stipend, I know that. And he hunts in there, he loves the land in there, he doesn't wanna hurt it, I totally understand that. But as a business plan for the town, DRA wants to see the contract on the parcel, and that should have been signed before, and it's supposed to tell the town, this is what we expect to bring in financially. You waive the tax so that they can get a higher stumpage value because of that. That's a positive thing, but you need a contract for each parcel. That's the project that's missing from this. And you need to know the timeline of when the money's made. And this bothers me that you keep talking about this microburst, because we're talking April 28th is when this was issued for the 1,000,000 board feet, 1,000 board feet that are coming off this property, 12 properties. Had nothing to do with the microburst. The plan was already in place for what was gonna happen.
Yes, and they were moved out. And after the microburst, Jeff got them back in there, because there was a lot of useful timber laying on the ground. And why let it go to waste? That's why they came back in.
So I walked in there, anyway, I'm not gonna argue it. They hadn't finished cutting, so whatever.
There's more than one woodlot in town that's got stuff laying around on the ground that they want to cut before it goes bad.
Could I just add that I think perhaps the fairest thing to Jeff would be, you mentioned this $1,000 annual retainer, I guess. It seems to me the legitimate use of that would be for him to, do the review of the intent to cuts. But when he actually has to go out on the land and devote time from his own career to go out and field check, that keeping track of the hours that he spends doing that, and then charging the town his legitimate hourly fee for providing that service, that would ensure that, he's fairly compensated for the work he's providing.
We actually had that conversation with him 2.5 years ago. And quite frankly, I was the one that made the motion to raise his pay, because he hasn't raised the pay in 20 years. And he flat out said, no, it would remain where it is, and he would donate the rest to the town.
Well, he's being extremely generous.
He is.
If I may, and that's the point. The two things, the forestry work that he does for the town is part of the operating budget, and there's a stipend. Well, it's not even a stipend, he charges to it, he doesn't always take the full 1,000. And the contract that we had signed with Jeff probably covers the town properties, and that contract is separate with Jeff for the work he does as an independent. You need to look at your contract before we have any more of this conversation, because without it, we're just throwing things against the wall. We might be this.
I made a note, Claire, we'll review it.
What's that?
I said I made a note, we'll review it.
Okay, RSA 227-J, :15. Interpretation of laws and rules of the contract.
Different subject.
Can I just,
Yeah.
it just strikes me, hearing this for the first time, that there's a perception of a conflict of interest, and that, boy, that really gets my dander up as a guy in the military. And I don't care if there is or is not, but listening to this for the first time, it sounds like there's a perception of conflict of interest. And if it goes to the logger, does it also go to the Effingham leaders, because you guys don't get a lot of money either, or our planning board. People, and you don't want to start thinking that town officials are getting a good old deal if things aren't on the up and up. So I would think that there would be a clear contract and it would go through really rigorous process before he gets his contract. For other contractors, it's a different course, but boy, for town officials to get a good old boy deal, and that's just what it sounds like. I don't know Jeff Libby or anybody like that, so I'm not accusing anybody, but it just strikes me listening to this conversation as a perception of a conflict of interest.
Mike,
So changing gears here so that we can all take it down a notch and review everything. I had my concerns again back with the transfer station process that we're under just because of timeline. So I'm gonna try and make it quick. Mr. Fuller did ask for checklist self-inspections because she couldn't find anything on there. I've got a form here, 3 pages, that I want to include with the filings when we get to that point, and I wanted to make sure you folks had a copy of this so that you could review it.
Do you have it as a PDF?
Think I got this maybe through Tara May Albert. You know, she does the training and stuff. I believe it's in with some of my correspondence there. Additionally, I was curious if you were going to accept that accident incident report paperwork that was kind of
the
paper.
one you gave us a
Yeah,
couple weeks ago.
I thought that was really.
That's something we already use. Whenever we have an accident, we have them posted in both buildings.
Oh, you
So
have been using.
I already use that, yeah.
Okay, so
Friday.
that's what I needed to know because I wanted to include that form
Yeah.
as part of this is to be used at the transfer station for
Give you some-
that time. So it was just those 2 items that I really wanted to get clarified, so thank you.
Okay,
I have a question on the dump, not logging, but with the plan that Mike was submitting the grant for the expansion of the dump, isn't that like gonna be a public hearing thing?
It's a long way from that.
yeah.
We're not
Before
even
it's
close.
submitted? Okay,
We haven't made we haven't made the plan yet. We're meeting to try and see what our needs are. We're meeting with people in the industry. And from there, if we can all agree on a plan, we'll probably file a grant. And since I'm kind of had a little success at USDA and had some discussions, I'm assuming I may end up being the one to write it, not necessarily.
because I did notice that there was all the trees that were cut as in place for expansion, and where they were cut is where the PFOA contamination is the strongest. So again, it's disruption of those chemicals that are kind of sitting there still. So I wondered, I just want you to have that in your head.
We weren't dredging. There's anything we've discussed at this point.
Okay, and the culverts that are sort of illegally dumped there on the side,
Those we
Those
want,
are-
those we want to extract, and as time goes on, that's a part of this conversation. Whether there's gonna be some usable space, which might be for storage of DPW type materials that are collecting there. But to clean out some of those things that haphazardly landed there without anybody really knowing.
and
what
like
it is.
next to the wetland too,
Correct.
right, so it could be moved closer to the other area that's open.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody have anything else?
I just have one
Yeah.
thing. With the absence of the zoning officer due to illness, does that responsibility for cease and desist fall with you?
Good question.
Since you're like,
I don't have the form.
that someone could dig one up for
Yeah.
you.
I'll have to,
Ultimately, it's
check
always,
with Rebecca and.
it's
I
ultimately
just,
always.
because of what Dave said, it is time sensitive.
Yeah.
And by next week, you'll have 5 more, at least.
And that's not just those, that have 5 more RVs too.
Well, nothing's gone in on Problem Lake Road yet. So,
I don't know, I haven't driven by there yet.
yeah, I,
What's that?
nothing on Problem Lake Road.
On Marston Hill, one
Yeah.
road.
Yeah, yeah, that's been there all summer.
That one should probably go away.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that other property was never approved, that little small one, so.
I think that's been taken up by the planning board.
Yeah, I know, but
the conversation was lost on the zoning officer at the time, because she said, basically made a deal with the guy to transition. But in that meeting, I was there, he said, no, I'm still gonna do it.
Sorry, we're having a meeting here. Claire,
Right.
Claire.
All right, anything else from anybody? If not, somebody want to make a motion?
Motion adjourned.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dave.